Lenny is back, alive in a physical body with a story to tell Division 3. But if David is offering to help Farouk find his body, does Farouk really want to piss David off? For every answer we get, only more questions arise. On this week's episode of the FX Original Series, Legion, Chapter 13. Hey everyone, D here, and welcome to this week's review of Legion. So yes, of course, spoilers are ahead. Alright, quite an episode this week. Strong visual storytelling as usual, amazing twisted perceptions, beautiful color palettes. I mean, a lot of that stuff that was shot out in the desert, which tends to, you think would be just, stark and empty, but between the browns and the suppressed colors of the desert plants and that bright blue sky, I mean, so much wonderful stuff. A lot of the dream sequences, a lot of those scenes between Farouk and Oliver, really wonderfully shot. I often think of this show as more visual poetry than, kind of a by-the-book, by-the-lines storytelling. A lot of just images meant to invoke emotional and internal responses, really, pull something out of you as opposed to just sort of tell the story paint by numbers wise. So really an incredible bit of work done this week. Director is a guy named Tim Mylance. Principally TV work. Recently has done stuff like Peaky Blinders, and he's doing The Terror, a few episodes on The Terror, which is on AMC right now. So, some twisted storytelling going on here, but here I think really presented well. Definitely dived into the Legion form of storytelling quite beautifully. But I have to say, by the time the episode ended, I was a little off. I wasn't quite sure how to feel with it. I mean, again, there's a consistent tale told within this episode for sure. That's the tale of Lenny, how she got there, what's kind of going on, and it wraps up well. It finishes, it's kind of chunky storyline. But outside of a few little drops, it didn't seem to really propel the story forward in the sense of a way that felt like it made sense. Like why all of this stuff was happening. So, again, while it was a well-told episode, I really enjoyed it from beginning to end. By the time we got to the end, I was kind of really wondering what Farouk's whole plan is. And we're definitely going to dive into that in just a little bit. But let's start off with our Scene of the Week! Which we're doing first this week because it is the first scene. First scenes establish the tone of the episode, and this one did it beautifully. Just the whole twisted upside down room with the giant television screens on the floor, on the ceiling, and the writing done all upside down. Definitely designed to disorient whoever is being interviewed. And Lenny, definitely feeling that that disturbance herself as she asked, are the laws of gravity being suspended here? Which I could imagine as you're sitting there in a room where it seems designed entirely upside down and you were looking up, staring down into the city. All very weird and just wonderfully done. Clark, really as the interviewer here, doing a beautiful job, keeping Lenny a little off balance, but still pursuing his answers. And here we can really see Lenny kind of in her real physical form. She's uncomfortable, which again, we haven't seen that much in any rest of her presentation, because of course, she's mostly been Farouk. She's mostly been the Shadow King. And now in her physical body, I mean, she's feeling pain, the little pinprick for the blood test, definitely seemed to disturb her, these new physical, feelings and urges, and diving right back into her sort of drug addiction there, immediately asking for a variety of things, whiteout even. Just snort that and that'll feel good. And we get a bit of a story, get some background on Lenny throughout all of this scene. Sort of being raised by Grandma with some vodka in the soda there, in the can. Really, you know, again, a lot of twisted, but the back and forth between her and Clark, I thought was just amazingly done. And as we see Aubrey Plaza, as we see Lenny kind of move more towards that desperation, you know, constantly fixated. Can we get to David? I just want to talk to David. You know, that's why she is here. She's avoiding any other question until it's really put upon her. And just the switch up as Clark's pulling up the card. Oh, it's blank. And the next one, it's Clark holding a card with Clark, holding something with Clark. Though it was interesting, in that one picture, his arms seem to be the side, and yet there are hands grasping around him. He's being hugged from behind. I'm not quite sure what that meant, but again, this all twisted visual storytelling, off-putting Lenny throughout the entire scene. But of course, the big question here is, how are you alive? How are you in a physical body? Something which, of course, is the sort of story of this whole episode. And I love Hamish's little, Hamish, the guy that plays Clark, Clark's line as he's leaving is, there are rooms in the basement of this building that people are put in and are forgotten about. Also very uncomfortable. But again, the whole scene, so, and then of course we have our little insight there at the end as Lenny is sort of losing it, that Farouk knows where his body is. It's in the desert that used to be a valley, I think it was that she said. Having to find David, and again putting that intensity on it. But again, it's everything about this scene, from the visual setup to the whole twisted perception to everything Clark was doing with the cards there, Lenny sort of deteriorating and rambling into the story of herself in a way to sort of establish her own identity as real. And then that just sort of emotional cascade at the end just sets up the episode beautifully and really sets the tone. Very disturbing, and I just think it just stuck with me throughout the entire episode. Oh, and of course, it's the first interview with Lenny, so we've got a big old 1 on the wall, and every interviewer, different number popping up in the background there. Now, the autonomy scene, I think, is the one scene that really opens things up for the rest of the story. Yeah, it continues on the little Lenny story, but I think it's the one scene that gives our insight into the larger picture. The rest of the episode, I think, really focused on this Lenny story and the sort of truth behind what's going on there. But I think here with autonomy, we have that, again, those little hints into what's happening in the larger storyline. Also, of course, it is the second interview with Lenny, so it has the big number 2 on the wall. Upside down, of course, because it's the upside down room. This room is scary, as Lenny had said. Yes, it is. But I love the first bit when autonomy is talking about the present. Real interesting idea, the fact that we are never really seeing the present moment, even as light comes through and hits our eyes and we see it and it processes. There's always time delays for its traveling and for processing time. So in a way, we're never really perceiving the present. We're seeing the almost immediate past, which I thought was sort of a really interesting point of view. I mean, it does. Light's really kind of the perfect way. Even the sun, as we're seeing it, takes 8 minutes to travel the 93 million miles from the sun to us. So we are looking at the sun as it was 8 minutes ago. And, you know, when we look up in the sky, we're seeing the stars as they were years or hundreds of years or thousands of years or even more ago, depending on its distance. So really kind of an interesting idea. The present, of course, a fun topic for psychologists and philosophers. I remember in one of my psychology classes, there was an idea of proposing the present from the aspect of a cube. You know, those little drawn cubes that you see where you can look right through, and sometimes it looks like it's oriented towards you, and sometimes it looks like it's oriented behind you, you know, backwards. Well, they say that if you're looking with a cube, you can hold one of those directions, one of those perceptions, for about 3 seconds before it will automatically shift, for an average untrained person. that's how long it will hold. It's about 3 seconds before it shifts its direction. And somebody has proposed maybe that's the length of the present, how long we can hold an idea, an image in our minds. And of course I say untrained because I had an engineer friend when I was in college who, because of the work that he did using structures like that, was able to hold one of those orientations for an indefinite period of time. Now, of course, we get two other things going on. One, the whole eye thing, which was really freaky. And I rewatched most of the episode afterwards to sort of track it. And most of the time, yeah, it looks like Lenny has brown eyes. But I even think in the midst of some scenes, they may throw in those contacts just to occasionally, especially if you notice in the first opening sequence, you don't really get good shots of her eyes. A lot of stuff from the side, or her head's up and she's kind of looking in a direction. You get a few of them. But the way that they set the light, or if they've added the contacts, even in then it looks like there's points where it's totally brown and other ones where it looks almost blue. So whether they did that by adding in context or they were just playing with the direction the light was moving so you couldn't ever be entirely sure, it was interesting that they occasionally kept throwing that off. They were making it very unsure until they really had that big reveal. Which of course is really important considering whose body she ends up being. But again, just a great moment. And also it's like, how can you make us see brown and blue? It's not really a Lenny power there. So I'm not sure if that's part of being in this new body, that she can occasionally pull this out, or it's always there and it's kind of masked up. Again, not entirely sure, though we do find out later on, of course, that Lenny is still working for the Shadow King. Now, the other real thing that we see within this scene is that little memory bit when Tanami tries to actually tap directly into Lenny's mind to see what is the truth, what is it she actually remembers, who body is she in. And when he tried to push that, I mean, even David says later on, I can read your mind, but I can't separate the ideas. I can't separate your ideas from Farouk's ideas. They all seem the same, which, considering that she's gone through Farouk's mind, sort of makes sense. But as he's going into trying to access those memories, I think he actually accessed his own, because we do get that flash of him lying on the bed, and we see the little slimy bird thing going in, which we saw a couple of episodes ago. So I'm wondering if he is starting to remember, he's accessing his own repressed memories. And then we get that weird shot of Fukuyama with his glowing basket and everything. Again, looking great, looking like a light bulb out there, almost like a firefly. In that sense, in the darkness, with just kind of like that big glowing basket around him. And then we get that weird in-shot to reveal him as this giant bug head. Now, I'm not suspecting that he's an actual bug-headed person underneath there. He might be. We haven't looked underneath. But I think that this is applying. This is what I'm saying, looking at the larger picture, the larger movement of this season. Is I really think that Fukuyama is an important villain behind this. What this seemed to imply is that it's Fukuyama who is sending out the false memories, the delusions, those ideas that get in your head and start twisting up your mind. It seemed to be the monk beforehand. Now, it could also be that it's not Fukuyama before, but it's Fukuyama now, after that weird connection. Again, he had the wires all connected between the monk and him. If something there twisted up Fukuyama's mind. I don't know. I know I've mentioned the Modak theory many times, but there is something really disturbing about that. And I think this is that line, this is that image that's implying Fukuyama's importance in the larger picture, and that perhaps he is the one setting out the little slimy bird delusions into everyone's mind. All right, our Oliver and Farouk scenes, beautifully shot, really, and presented well as two, well, occasional compatriots and occasionally not. There's definitely there's that wonderful image when we had Oliver digging up the grave, while Farouk just sits there sipping his tea and watching. And it was definitely that vision of the slave and the king. even though at one point Farouk is also telling Oliver that we are like lions. And it shows, I mean, Farouk is definitely the man in charge here. By far, no doubt. But there is a strength inside of Oliver, which I think Farouk finds appealing, interesting, a compatriot that he can almost really talk to and connect with. Oliver's suffering a lot from being kind of away from his own body for so long, and now that he's back into it, he's got Farouk that he has to deal with. I love David's line earlier when he said, later on, I never knew real silence until Farouk was out of my head. I thought was really cool. So now Oliver is sort of stuck with that. And we get that sort of twisted perception on morality. I mean, in some ways, Oliver has been so separated from his body and from reality and things, he just sees point A to point B to point C. He just sees those little connections. It isn't until sort of Melanie is brought up, it seems to be that she represents his moral center and is the one that brings him back into that kind of aspect of morality, which of course when he does tell Farouk, I am going to kill you. Which is interesting and leads to that second really fun conversation between the two of them is what Farouk's asking, how are you going to do this? And the interesting thing about this back and forth is it actually seems like Oliver can hide this information from Farouk. Farouk seems like he could just reach in and pluck that out, especially living inside of Oliver's mind. He could certainly do it with David, but he was with David for years. He's only with Oliver for a short time, and Oliver is already a trained telepath. He's already very strong in with that. So I like that idea that even as Oliver is working for Farouk, as sort of a slave to Farouk, that he can hold back a little part of himself to plan against. Now, whether that will be successful or not, we'll have to sort of wait and see. But the fact that he can do that, I thought was really cool. And then, of course, the rest of the things are just sort of Oliver falling in line with what Farouk needed to do, which was apparently go get David's sister. Using the device from Division 3, which again makes it all really interesting how big and complex this plan of Farouk's is. That this invasion of Division 3, which seemed to be able to find the monk, was, I don't know, really to actually get this device and not find the monk? Maybe both. Maybe it was a two-parter. And our last interview with Lenny, number 3 in the background, when David does show up. And, you know, I like the energy kind of between two of them. You know, it's like two old friends reconnecting. There was definitely that feel in the beginning. But I have to say, the way they shot it with that light off to the side of David, he didn't look like David all the time. I mean, he did, but there was a different feel. And certainly as he's approaching Lenny come from this sort of new position of strength that he hasn't had that real interaction before. It was a little off-putting. I mean, in a good way, but it just gave that extra weird element to the scene. And I love that David is able to, like I said, peer into Lenny's mind. I know that you're still working for him, but I can't figure out the difference between your thoughts and his thoughts, which, like I said, considering that Lenny was part of Farouk, a plaything in his mind, that once she gets deposited inside this new body, that yeah, a lot of that psyche would be mixed up. But then, of course, we get to the big reveal that Lenny is in David's sister's body. And it's weird. I got sort of a feeling of that early on, like, oh my God, we haven't seen David's sister. I wonder if it's her. But it was flashing. It just passed. You know, the many things that you sort of think of. But when it actually went down, I mean, first of all, let's be honest. The submarine donut car, way cool. I will buy donuts off of a car like that. And perfect looking in the desert. Again, everything old, aged, worn down, and yet odd looking like everything else. A ring of security guys around this house in the middle of nowhere. Looks like it's disguised as a Superfund site. Nuclear waste disposal. I guess if you're going to hide someone, people wouldn't want to look in a place that feel like it's covered with radiation. But again, just a weird scene. And again, we have her thinking about Fukuyama, thinking that she's one of the Vermilion. which, again, I think all of this is playing further. I know we have to wait and see. We're only getting little hints. But Fukuyama, man, I don't trust him. But then we get the whole twisted. We're using the machine. They had gone out, basically the whole thing. They had gone out, found Lenny's body. It wasn't Farouk's. Pulled off a piece of her flesh, put it in the machine that she got from Division 3, went up and sprayed it over the sister, which I would assume replaces her DNA with the sample DNA that's in the device, which is why when they were taking the blood test that it probably will come up as Lenny. I mean, it might come up with the sister. I don't know, but since they didn't really play that out, I would guess that it was coming up as Lenny there. So yeah, interesting device. Interesting that Clark was asking how she got into a body when Division 3 has a device that can sort of kind of do that. I don't know. How much does Clark know and how much is he covering up? It's hard to get a read on him. But again, just really the whole thing definitely disturbing, definitely off-putting, and brings up again to this big question of why? Why would Farouk do this? We saw the effect that it had on David. It pissed him off. He wants to kill Farouk. And we did hear from future Sid that a week from that conversation, just a few days from now, David bashes Farouk's head in. This seems to give a good reason of why he would want to do this. But if Farouk knows that David is trying to help him off of instructions from future Sid, why would he piss David off like this? Why would he do this to David? Now, I mean, there is one... He could be putting his enemies off kilter. Obviously, taking Oliver's body, taking Oliver away, demoralized Melanie. She's pretty much out of it right now. Getting rid of David's sister here is definitely going to demoralize David. It's going to put him off of his game. A lot of emotional response. I don't know how many other people actually have family that they can connect with. And maybe that's Farouk's plan. But it doesn't seem like a good plan. Just, if you're going to do that, just wait for it a little bit. At least wait until you do, until David helps you find your body, and then you can go ahead and mess with him. So, that's what I'm saying. There's questions in it. We answer the question, how did Lenny get here? And it just opens more questions of why. Why would Farouk do this? Now, we did have that little bit with John Hamm talking about humans or pattern recognition devices. That's why we do it. It's a survival instinct, and sometimes we put in patterns where they don't actually exist. But nothing else really seemed to play into that idea throughout the episode unless you're looking that this pattern that is Farouk's plan isn't a pattern, it's random. But Farouk doesn't seem to be like that type of individual. He seems like he would plan this all out, especially if he had to get this machine way back when he went and raided in Division 3 to then go find the body. I don't know. Like I said, this is a lot of work for Farouk to do, and I don't see what his endgame, what he gets out of this, how this gets him closer to his body. Does it encourage David in Division 3 to find the body faster? They're already looking as hard as he can. David is a willing assistant. Now, he's going to want to kill Farouk. So, like I said, it's a little confusing. One possible answer, though, I would have to say, if Fukuyama is behind all of this and he has inserted one of those delusional worms basically into Farouk's psyche to drive him a little nuts, maybe he's making Farouk act in this manner unpredictably in order to offset David, so David would kill Farouk, so Farouk wouldn't be there to try and stop Fukuyama. Or, I know, we think David's going to be the villain, but that just, again, it just seems too obvious. Alright, just a couple of small things. One, I loved Oliver complaining about potentially digging up a dead body. Why? It's a new suit. Cream. Just feels unpleasant doing that. Again, really just sets up Oliver's character so strongly and just gives a great back and forth between him and Farouk. Just love those scenes. I love Ben describing what that feeling is that something is about to happen. Dread. And then that windmill in the back, that constant turning, just stops. It's like it has arrived. Really, just the whole setup for that scene was just really, really disturbing. Oh, and Gran Lenore only drinks after 5, so her clock has nothing but 5s on it. That is totally kitschy, and I believe that clock exists. Alright, well I think that pretty much covers everything, at least all of the main points. A lot of questions answered, which of course has only led to more questions. But we are setting up a big face-off between David and Farouk here. David is enraged. Farouk is planning something, definitely has something darker planned ahead. That's what Lenny kept kind of referring to as these big, darker plans. We're not going to be ready, we're all going to be hit. I'm in it with you now. She's in a body even if it's not her own. Now, next week, whether it's part of this or this is part of David sorting things out, it looks like we may be getting a look into the more comic David Legion going on here. A lot of manifestations of multiple personalities. Is this going on in his mind? Are these different parallel universes converging? Or is this all something else? And how is this leading towards our big conflict? Gonna have to stick around to find out. So, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this review. And if you did, you know what you can do. Go ahead and hit that like button. Thoughts, ideas, and comments, you know where to put them, down in the section below. Really appreciate all of your guys' insights. I know it's a confusing show. There's many interpretations that are going on, a lot of discussions happening. All I ask is that you please keep it civil, respect the people you talk to. Freedom of speech does not mean freedom to be a dick. So, keep it civil. Thank you. It's so much more interesting when we can share and do this great back and forth. A lot of ideas out there. Some of them are right, some of them aren't. Sometimes it's difficult to tell the two apart. So, let's be cool about that. Anyway, you can always catch me on Twitter and Instagram. I am at Darren Jakes. Please subscribe if you're not. Click this button. You won't miss any of these reviews. Got a lot more Legion coming up. And we'll throw a couple of our latest reviews right here for you to check out. So, that's going to be it for me. I'm D, and I'm out of here. Catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.